I'm Peggy Peck, MedPage Today, reporting from New Orleans at the American Heart Association meeting. Jupiter, a trial of rosuvastatin 20 milligrams in people that were apparently healthy, has given us a new perspective on primary prevention, as we hear first from Dr. Ritker, lead author of the study.
The primary endpoint of the trial is shown here. This is first ever event of myocardial infarction, stroke, hospitalization for unstable angina, revascularization procedures, or cardiovascular death. There were 251 in the placebo group, an absolute event rate of 1.4 per 100 person years. The rosuvastatin group had 142, 0.77 per 100 person years. That translates into a 44% reduction in hazard ratio 0.56. 95% confidence interval is very tight, and the p-value less than 0.00001. The results are remarkably consistent across all endpoints. The left-hand side of the slide is the hard endpoint of myocardial infarction, stroke, and cardiovascular death. A 47% hazard reduction. The right-hand side, arterial revascularization or hospitalization for unstable angina, an identical 47% hazard reduction. Again, both p-values less than 0.0001. Despite evaluating a population with lipid levels widely considered to be optimal in almost all of our current guidelines, the relative benefit observed in the Jupiter was greater than in almost all prior statin trials. I just wanted to end with a calculation from our biostatistician Robert Glynn, who has estimated that application of the simple screening and treatment strategy tested here, when used over a 5-year period, could conservatively prevent more than 250,000 heart attacks, strokes, revascularization procedures, or cardiovascular deaths in the United States alone.
But Dr. Sharon Hayes from the Mayo Clinic Rochester raised some questions about the health of this population.
This was a healthy population in the sense that they didn't have overt cardiovascular disease, but they weren't a low-risk population in terms of their risk factors. Over 40% had metabolic syndrome. Their average blood pressure and triglyceride levels were higher than optimal. So this was not a population that already had their other risks optimally addressed. And I think that is important when we're trying to convey this or transfer these data to our own patients who maybe we've corrected all of the other risks or they have no other risks other than perhaps the LDL or CRP. Now, they did analyze the data and look at that group that only had the elevated CRP, and they too benefited. But one has to look at, there was a lot of room for correction of other risks in the overall population of this trial.
Asked about this, Dr. Ritker said, there has been some discussion here at the AHA about this population, the apparently healthy men and women in this trial, with people saying that they really were not all that healthy. 41% metabolic syndrome, blood pressure maybe a little bit higher than optimal. I'd like you to respond to that. How healthy are these people? Are they patients?
These are people. These are just average people on the street who got recruited for this trial. Remember, they don't have any prior history of cardiovascular disease. They do not have diabetes. They're healthy. They're the kind of people who come in for their routine annual physical. Now, that being said, some of them have high blood pressure, some of them smoke, some of them are heavier than they ought to be. But, Peggy, there's a large number of people in this study. Over 6,500 individuals in this study have an elevated hs-CRP and no other major risk factor at all. And that group got the same 40% risk reduction that everyone else achieved. They weren't heavy, they didn't smoke, they didn't have high blood pressure. This is a real study of the general population. It's part of why it's so exciting. We have an opportunity to extend prevention out of our patients and into just the general people who are trying to prevent it.
I think it will change the questions that my patients are asking me. Very clearly, this is going to be covered, and there will be more individuals coming in and asking for a statin or a CRP, or does this apply to me? So I think that is what we all need to be prepared for as we look forward to taking care of patients. For the individual patient, I think that individual who has other risks, using CRP and elevated CRP as one decision maker in whether or not to aggressively lower lipids will clearly expand, and it will expand in my practice. I'm already using it to a certain extent, and this will give me the evidence base to do so and to also treat those individuals and know that I'll be lowering their risk.
And the final word goes to Dr. Ritker.
It's hard for us clinically. All of us have had the experience of a 45-year-old patient who goes out running and doesn't come home. This is about what was wrong with that patient. This is a silent issue. We don't know their level of inflammation. We don't know their level of cholesterol until we measure them.
So, to sum up, Jupiter gives us good news about a potent statin that may save lives in people who are apparently healthy. I'm Peggy Peck, MedPage Today.